the rail to remind Jeb he hadn't been fed yet. "I haven't had my coffee," he told the quarter horse, as if the animal could commiserate with him. He hardly ever rode anymore, but kept the horse for company. He fed the gelding, then returned to the kitchen. Cursing his sister and her obstinate ways, he wrote a grocery list. If he was going into town, he'd make it worth his while, and hurried toward his pickup. The October wind felt almost hot in his face. A few minutes later, he drove out of the yard, sparing a glance for the bison grazing stolidly on either side. He moved the herd on a pasture rotation system. Later in the day, he'd separate the weanlings and feeders from the main herd. Buffalo ranching. He'd made the right decision. They were hardy animals, requiring less care than cattle did. The demand for their meat was growing and often exceeded supply. Business was good. Currently, his females were worth more as breeding stock than meat. Just last week, Jeb had sold one of his cows for a healthy $5,000. To his surprise, he enjoyed the 50-minute drive to Buffalo Valley, although he rarely ventured into town these days. Usually, he preferred to drive with no real destination, enjoying the solitude and the changing seasons and the feel of the road. When he pulled into town, he was immediately struck by the changes the past 10 months had brought to Buffalo Valley. Knight's Pharmacy was, and always had been, the brightest spot on Main Street. Hassie Knight had been around as long as he could remember, and served the world's best old-fashioned ice cream sodas. He'd loved that place as a kid, and had considered it a special treat when his mother took him there on Saturday afternoons. Like Marta Hansen, Hassie Knight had been a friend of his mother's. She was also the one woman he knew, other than Sarah, who didn't make him feel like a cripple. Three of a Kind, the town's only hotel, bar, and grill, was down the street from the pharmacy. Jeb had briefly met Buffalo Bob a couple of years earlier. He never did understand why a leather-clad, tattooed biker with a ponytail would settle in Buffalo Valley, but it wasn't up to him to question. Bob had lasted longer than Jeb had thought he would. People seemed to like him, or so Calla, Jeb's niece, had informed him. The pizza parlor was new, but now that he thought about it, he remembered Sarah telling him Calla had started working there part-time. Good thing. The kid needed an outlet. She was 15 and full of attitude. Jeb suspected that Dennis and his sister would have been married by now, if it wasn't for Calla. Sarah's quilting store came into view next, and despite his irritation with her, he couldn't squelch his sense of pride. Her quilts were exquisite, crafted from muslin colored with various natural dyes that Sarah derived from plants, berries, and lichen. She managed to make something complex and beautiful out of this hand-dyed muslin, combining traditional methods with her own designs. The store was a testament to her talent and skill. She took justifiable pride in her work, displaying quilts in the front window of what had once been a florist shop. The spring bouquet had been closed for at least 15 years. Folks didn't buy a luxury like hothouse flowers when it was hard enough just getting food on the table. Nor had there been much to celebrate in Buffalo Valley for a long time. Still, the town showed more life than it had in years. The old Buffalo Valley Theater appeared to be in operation. He recalled his father saying something about a school play being held there last Christmas. He didn't realize the theater had reopened permanently, but he supposed it made sense, since the place had been completely refurbished. The theater wasn't his only surprise. The outside of Hanson's Grocery had recently been painted as well. God knew it could use a facelift. The sign was down and propped against the building. It was probably worn out, like so much else in town. Not delaying the unpleasant task any longer, Jeb parked and headed toward the grocery, determined to be as cold and aloof as possible until Marta Hansen got the message. If past experience was anything to go by, that could take a while. "Hello." He wasn't 2 steps into the grocery when a friendly voice called out to greet him. His reply was more